right. Well, we got about half the people who have registered, I think. So sounds like a great place to start. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ray. I'm the admin assistant in our linguistics department, and I will be moderating in place of Addison since he couldn't be here today. And so we'll play popcorn with our speakers here, and I'll just call on one person and you can introduce yourself, and then you can choose the next person to introduce themselves. And since we have a few students, if you feel comfortable, we would love to hear from you as well. I don't have any prepared questions, so it'll be a fully student-led. Yeah, and let's start with Raylene.
Sure. So my name is Raylene Liu. I graduated with my master's in linguistics from the University of Utah in 2021. My current title is Solution Delivery Manager, and I work for a company called Master of Code Global, which is a global company based in Europe, Canada, and America. And I work with clients across the globe to deliver AI solutions for them. So that includes conversational AI solutions as well as some back-end solutions. So I work on delivering those, working with a team of developers and designers to meet client standards. So that's a little bit about me. We'll pass it over to Andrew. You're next on my screen.
All right. Hi, I'm Andrew Zupon. I did both my undergraduate and a master's degree at Utah. I got my master's in linguistics in 2015. It's been a while. And I've been doing a lot since then, but right now I am a computational linguist at Google in Mountain View, and I work on the Google Assistant, working on natural language generation. Yeah, ask me more later, but that's the short version. I'll pass it over to Riley next.
Yeah, hi, I'm Riley. I'm a very recent graduate from the Undergrad Department of Linguistics at the U. I just graduated this past December, but I got a job doing sort of like natural language processing, but like on the interpretability side. So what my research team is doing is like looking at these big language models and kind of like breaking them into human interpretable chunks. And that requires a lot of linguistics because it's like, what is this model doing with this clause? And like, what does this clause mean to humans and language? So that's kind of how I got into linguistics. I'm like thinking about grad programs, and there's like a lot of tension between like just going for linguistics or going for like AI, but I think I'm gonna like continue to pursue NLP because it's fun, and I love math and computer science, and I obviously love linguistics too. So far it's been a great combo. But yeah, does any of the participants want to introduce themselves? I don't want to like pick on someone in case you don't, but go for it if you want to.
I'll ask a question for Riley to kind of get things started and warm up a little bit. I do have a student who couldn't join our Zoom today, but I hear them talking about math every single day that they're in the department behind my desk, and I love it. I'm a sociolinguist personally, so I dabble more in the language and culture, and I have a background in electrical engineering for a couple of years. But with COVID, I was just not going to do that. So I decided to follow my passions. Anyway, so I love hearing them talk about math. Can you talk a little bit more about how that relates to linguistics and how it relates to your field in computational and natural language processing?
Yeah, so honestly, I'm always surprised at how similar I find, or like I guess how harmonious I find math and language. There's a lot of sort of like there's a lot of things about language that are very formal the same way that math is, and you can almost like quantify them or express them with like very mathematical, like formulas or functions or expressions. And so what's great about that is that computers, think in these ways of like math, functions, numbers, things like that. And language is very easily like contained in, forms that computers can understand. So having a good like foundation in math, or at least computer science, like sort of a functional understanding of math, is really great because you take a language that you understand, you take the form of language that you understand, you just mathematize it, and then you can work with it on a computer. And so like if you're interested in those two things, there is a lot of overlap. And I always found that in my linguistics courses, like I would have learned something in like a proofs class or like linear algebra even, and we were talking about something in linguistics. I'm like, I know the mathematical form for this. Like I could express this in an equation if I needed to. And it's not a huge field of linguistics, I don't think, but mathematical linguistics really is a thing. And there's like books on it about how people write these like truth tables about like, linguistic expressions. So they really do go hand in hand. But I don't think you should ever have to choose between math and language because they're my two favorite things. So
I personally think that math is a really beautiful art, so that's really awesome. Thank you.
I just chime in and say that I also started off thinking I wanted to be an engineer and then decided I didn't anymore and wanted to be a linguist instead. So, but I can definitely say, yeah, I was in civil engineering at first. But, taking a bunch of the math classes, calculus, linear algebra, at the time was not fun, to be honest. But, later on when I started doing more machine learning kind of stuff, that it came back, it's like, oh, I remember this, it helps. So, if you are able to get some of that background somehow or other, it is really useful sort of downstream for doing more NLP kinds of work.
I couldn't make it through the physics personally. That was my issue. Physics 2 was way too hard for me in digital learning.
yeah, I will say physics is, I think, also very helpful for, I mean, that was my other degree, was physics. I double majored because I couldn't pick between the two of them, but I definitely like think that going for like a hard science that like almost doesn't seem relevant to linguistics is such a good foundation for like problem solving and just general like impressiveness to people. Like I kind of attribute getting my job to a little bit of the physics because they're like, oh wow, you did physics? Okay. I mean, I guess you're probably smart, you know how to do math. So it definitely prepares you in those ways because you do have to take a lot of those like really quantitative courses, but like those do really translate super well to compling, I think.
I know we have a couple of faculty that also focus a lot in statistics, which I usually get super lost in, but it's always really fun to hear them talk about it. Let's also, I think there are a couple people who may not know a lot about what computational linguistics is. Does anyone want to try defining it? Because I feel like I am always really bad when people ask me questions about it in the office.
I could give it an attempt. I feel like it's like in maybe the popular understanding, if you tell people, oh, I do like natural language processing or I do AI, like people are like, oh yeah, like I get what you do, I guess. But I think like specifically computational linguistics is like, ooh, it is really hard because it's like there is the whole AI aspect of it, but really you could do it without building any AI models at all. You could just say like representing and processing language computationally, I guess, like in a computer or with an algorithm or yeah, I think that might be my attempt, my initial definition of complaying.
I mean, I would say, it's a pretty broad term, right? It's basically, I've seen a term, like a definition, basically saying it's getting computers to do useful things with human language. but what does that mean? So it can really be all over the place. But like knowing anything about linguistic structure, how language works, how language is used, so even like sociolinguistic kind of knowledge can be used in Complang NLP pipelines in some way. So it's very broad, which kind of makes it hard sometimes, but that also makes it nice because you can come from different perspectives and different backgrounds and still have something to say, something to contribute to the areas, to the field.
Yeah, that got me thinking too. When I first graduated, so I just have a straight linguistics master's. I took one Complang class, I believe, since that was kind of a new concept at the University of Utah. And after I graduated, I was reaching out to people on LinkedIn to learn more about what I wanted to do. And I reached out to a man, and his job title was computational linguist. So very traditional in that aspect. And I remember he told me, he said, I would rather hire computer people or computational linguists, like the true, strong, technical, skilled people, than linguists because he can teach computer science majors linguistics, but he didn't want to train linguistics people to do computer science. And I thought, oh my goodness, I don't have a very strong technical background. I can't do anything in computational linguistics. But that's not true, because I am now in a position where I work with a lot of computational linguists, and they don't have those job titles. That's not a true typical position. But that's okay. I learned the technical skills I needed as I went, and I focus more on the humanities side. I work with a lot of people, I do a lot of research, and a little bit less on the traditional computational linguistics side. So yeah, it's a very broad field for sure.
Ashley, I hope that you have a question. I will be right back. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, now's a good time. Okay, and that's actually, is it Raylene? Am I saying your name correctly? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, perfect. I was gonna ask about that because I'm not in the computational linguistics minor, and I'm pretty much at the end of my undergrad anyways. And so I've kind of been listening to the other two going, oh, well, I feel like I'm lost then. Like I don't really have a hope of going anywhere with this or getting into computational linguistics since I don't have that background as much. So can you tell me a little bit more about your experience, maybe some specifics of what your job entails, especially pulling from your education, like what specific courses or experiences from school are you applying?
Yeah, that's a great question. My career journey has kind of taken a very non-traditional path, I think, compared to a lot of people who are in more of a management type position, solution delivery type management. So when I was fresh out of grad school, I started as a AI specialist. That was the title. And you'll probably quickly realize that titles don't mean much. There's so many titles that do the same type of work, and then there's titles that make no sense in the industry. So what I did as an AI specialist is I essentially developed chatbots. So I worked with out-of-the-box solutions, Google Dialogflow, Microsoft Bot Framework, and we had our own internal one too that I learned. So it was very low code solutions, right? I mean, knowing Python helped. I took some Python courses in my grad program. So it helped, but it wasn't essential. And so I started doing AI training, learning about NLU frameworks, learning how to train these bots, learning how to launch them, and then analyze them after they were launched, how people were using them, analyzing the data that came back. After I learned more about that role, I jumped to a conversation designer role. So this is really where I felt my linguistics skills helped me shine. So I utilized syntax, semantics, phonology for voice bots, as well as sociolinguistics. And I really got to lean more into how are people actually using language and who are our target audience that will be interacting with these bots. And so that was a really great field. So I would say if you're just starting out, conversation design is a great gateway that doesn't require a significant amount of technical skills, although I will add any technical skills will help you advance and you will need them as you go. But you're looking more at language and you're coming from maybe a non-traditional background for conversation design. But linguistics is a perfect gateway into the field.
Sweet. That's way cool. And then I'm gonna ask a follow-up question, and anybody can answer this. What is this job market like in Utah specifically? And so you can answer with your job, and then I'm curious what the like more specialized actual computational linguistics background those jobs are as far as being in Utah. Sorry if that was confusing.
Well, I will say I'm based in Canada, so our job market is not as great as the US. But a lot of the roles that I've had and look for are fully remote. So that's something to consider.
I'm in the Bay Area, so that can tell you a little bit. You know, like I've heard a lot of good things about tech in Utah. So like when I was still in my PhD program, I was applying like for internships like Ancestry. They have like machine learning positions and things like that. And I'm not too familiar with what other companies, but I think it's, you know, there should be some. But yeah, like a lot of my other classmates have gotten jobs in various other places or fully remote even. So there are some companies like Grammarly is one that does like a fully remote or sort of a remote hybrid model. So, you know, if being in Utah and staying in Utah is important, there are options, you know, like in Utah-based companies are just one possibility. There are also the fully remote options as well.
Yeah, I also only really noticed like when I was looking for like very specific NLP jobs, there was a lot in like national labs, like because I work in one, but noticing that like every national lab has their like little NLP team. But those also tend to be fully remote positions as well. So I think because of the nature of like the computational aspect, if you can do your work on a computer, then you don't really need to be in an office so much. So I think that's actually one of the perks of it. But yeah, I didn't really see anything necessarily in Salt Lake. But like you said, we do have like a good like technology, you know, base here. So I probably just overlooked a couple of companies that actually have like more in-house NLP stuff.
Riley, I might have missed where you said you're working now.
Pacific Northwest National Lab, which is a
Okay.
mouthful. We just call it PNL. But yeah, my whole team is in Seattle, and then I'm over here. I'm still in Salt Lake.
Okay.
But
Okay.
yeah.
I think I looked at, yeah, I saw when I was applying for jobs, I did see a lot of positions there, but in like the whatever the like Eastern Washington.
Yeah, they have a few campuses like kind of scattered around there, but yeah, there's like a big ML team just in that part of the lab.
I have another question for Raylene. Can you talk a little bit more about your international experience? Like, did you choose Canada because that's where you wanted to live, or was that just where your career took you?
So that's where visas took me. It was not a conscious choice. There is significantly more money in the US for working in tech. But because of COVID and visa limitations, my husband and I came back to Canada because that was the only country we could stay together during COVID. So I'm Canadian. It was easier to come back to Canada. I have looked for jobs in the US since most of them can be done fully remote. It's definitely doable. But Canada has a decent tech market that's growing, and there's international positions around the world too that don't mind if you're based in North America. So lots of opportunities, but Canada was not my first choice, but thankfully it's worked out well for me. But I will add on that note too that any Americans often can apply for Canadian positions. The pay is a bit lower, but they often do consider that you are based in the US, so they pay you a little bit better than the Canadian counterparts. So if you are looking for job opportunities, you can always check north of the border because you never know. Competition might be a little bit less. I know the US is pretty popular right now.
One thing that I'm always interested in when looking on the job market is always like what other kinds of benefits do your companies have? So if, you know, per se you're in Canada, you may get paid less, but like what are some of the trade-offs for that? And Andrew and Riley, feel free to answer as well if you have knowledge on your company's benefits.
I mean, I guess I would say healthcare. We've got a pretty good healthcare system that we don't really pay too much for. And the ones that do our work covers a lot of extra benefits as well. So things like massage therapy, acupuncture, all that good stuff. But on top of that, it's pretty similar to the US, similar vacation pay, similar sick days. If you work in the big tech, and Andrew, I'm sure you're with Google, you've got a lot better benefits. But I've worked in startups, so there's been very limited funds for a lot of things, but they're pretty good about technology, making sure you have the tools you need. But yeah, that's been my experience.
I'll say, yeah, the benefits are pretty good at Google. As far as amenities, you know, working like on the Google campus, you know, there's snacks and cafes and such things, and you know, just like general other benefits like health insurance and other employment related benefits are good. You know, 401k matching sorts of things. But also, you know, it really does depend on the, you know, even in a huge company like Google, it does depend on your specific team and your organization. But, you know, my team and my org are really good at being flexible. So we are, you know, required to be in the office 3 days a week. So we're not, you know, we can't be fully remote, but we don't have to be in 5 days a week. And even so, it's very flexible. You know, if you have an appointment or, you know, something else comes up, you know, everyone's fine with you taking another day working from home or going home early for whatever reason. So the flexibility there is really nice. And I've heard that with other tech companies as well, but I'm not sure how widespread it is overall.
Yeah, and I guess I could speak a little bit about the national labs. I'm sure each national lab does things a little bit differently, but my title is like post-bachelor's research associate, which is just what you can do when you graduate with your undergrad and you want to continue doing research. It's like a postdoc, but like way less cool. But if that's something that you're interested, like continuing to do research, but like you still want to make like good tech money, that's like a great way to do it, is do tech for a national lab. But what's great about them is like you get sort of the benefits of like a big girl job is what I call it. But like you have like dental insurance, like vision, health insurance, savings plan, all that good stuff, even as like a post-bac. But then, you know, you also get that added benefit of like you get your name on papers if you really like to do research and get published. There's like super good networking events. They'll pay to like send you to conferences. They're gonna fly me to Seattle this summer to like go to a technical conference. So if you want to like continue to do sort of like academic things, and also like have health insurance, then national labs are really great for that.
Do you guys feel that there has been a lot of like there are a lot of opportunities to move up in your company, or do you feel like they provide enough support where you're at that it doesn't feel as necessary?
I think with at least PNNL, there's a lot of opportunities to like stay at the lab and like become like a scientist one, a scientist two, and like go on up as well. There's a lot of like lateral transferability that you can do. Work with a lot of people that have backgrounds in different things than AI or computational linguistics. There's like cognitive psychologists, and we work with like a water chemist person who just like happened to like want to transition into this space. And so it kind of gives you opportunities to do work on other teams as well. So I kind of am double dipping right now and doing something a little bit more math heavy and then a little something more linguistics heavy, but just because I was interested and I asked if I could be a part of both teams. So I think within national labs, or at least PNNL, there's a lot of sort of, because you're always helping out other teams, it's really easy to move between other teams. And then as you gain experience, you can have a lot of upward mobility. But it's great if you just like to try things out too. So yeah, lots of growth opportunities there, at least intellectually.
I can speak from a startup perspective. Lots of growing opportunities if you're willing to put in the work. It's chaotic. There's lots of people that are running multiple things. So you've got to really put the work in when it's busy. But if you do, you come away with a lot more skills than maybe I would develop in a bigger, slower company. So that's also led to less stability. Been part of layoffs. I've had companies sold out and coworkers who don't enjoy new companies. But I've been fortunate enough to jump to other positions and grow my skills in other areas as well. So I find the growth potential is massive. But also if I wanted to stay with a company and explore other areas, because they're startups, they're open to letting you learn skills in other areas too. So like I said, I started out with developing. I was a bot developer, AI trainer, went to design. And then I jumped to a whole new company and I was the only one managing the entire bot and AI system. So it's been a lot of growth, and now I get to kind of pick titles that I'm interested in and type of companies that I like.
I'll say from my experience, generally, yes. I mean, like similarly with like layoffs the last year or so has not been super great for big tech. My team has somehow been mostly fine, so that's good for me. But as far as growth generally, as far as skills, yes. So, you know, when I was interviewed, they were asking me like, oh, hey, do you know C++? And I didn't at the time. But they asked me if I would be willing to learn C++, and I said yes, because I wanted the job. And so I ended up learning C++, and now I know a fair amount of C++. So I figure, you know, that's a good skill to have, you know, for my current job or any future jobs. But also, I mean, I've only been in my current role for 2 years, but I have seen other colleagues be, you know, promoted, or, you know, there is opportunities to transfer ladders as well. You know, one of the people I'm familiar with started off as a linguist and then became like a software engineer. So, you know, there is that kind of growth opportunity as well if you want to be doing more, you know, CS kind of things, but still in, you know, a language related team. There are those opportunities.
So I have a question. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I guess my question is just sort of, I guess, just sort of about the job market. Because right now I'm in my second year of undergrad here at the U, double majoring in computer science and linguistics. Definitely want to go into something NLP related, so I'm trying to, you know, take as many related classes to that as I can. But at the same time, I've also heard from a lot of people that specifically in NLP, a lot of companies really want or even require you to have some sort of a like master's or PhD degree to be able to work for them. And I guess it's not necessarily that I'm even opposed to the idea of grad school, because I think it would definitely be interesting, but also at the same time, it's obviously a big financial commitment, a big time commitment. So I'm just sort of wondering what the sort of state of the industry is in terms of like, you know, if you just have just a bachelor's degree, I guess sort of if you double majored though, in my case, is it possible to somehow get a lower level position, or maybe find some sort of scenario where a company might help you pay for grad school if you sign with them afterwards, or just sort of stuff like that? Was my question.
I can start. So first of all, I don't actually have my PhD yet, as I did defend in February, but I'm graduating only this in May. So I got my job only having a master's degree, and like my manager has a PhD, but a lot of the other people I work with don't. I'm not sure how many of them just have bachelor's versus master's, but a PhD I think is definitely not, strictly necessary. But I think having the double major in CS will definitely be a bonus for you. But one thing to think about is, I think a lot of people might not be familiar, is that a lot of schools will pay you to go to grad school, right, for a master's or PhD. So and that can help. It's not, a lot, but it's something to live on. So, I mean, that's something to think about for sure. But yeah, I'm not sure what the job market is for, CS people. I know for linguists, it can be a little trickier. Like at Google, there have been not so many just linguists job postings, but there's always, CS people coming in. So I think that's definitely a good strategy. And definitely consider, masters, but maybe you can, start with job search and see how that goes, and maybe pivot if it's not panning out.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I work with a lot of people on my team that don't have master's degrees. There's a couple of people who have like PhDs in math and stuff like that, but a lot of the people that I interact with, especially people like closer to my age, like sort of freshly graduated, definitely don't have master's degrees yet. But I guess what I'd recommend is like when you're kind of like trying to play the job market a little bit is look for internships and do projects, because in a lot of my interviews they've asked like, so like what have you made, like what can you show me, like having a portfolio, like really concrete stuff, like hey, I built this thing that does this really cool thing that showcases that like I know how to do these kinds of things. And you can get that with research at the U, which I got a lot of my ML experience from a seismology lab of all places. But getting involved in that, my job is technically an internship, even though I'm like a fully benefited position. So there's a lot of like postgraduate internships available for people who want to like continue to build their skills in AI and CS and linguistics and things like that. So looking for those would be a good opportunity to like get paid to continue learning. And then like if you have a summer where you're not taking classes and you don't have to work too much, doing like a Codecademy course or something like that where you can actually build a whole project, or doing like a Kaggle challenge, so that you can like start to build your portfolio, so that when you do graduate you can be like, hey, I've been working on this for like 4 years, look at my crazy impressive like list of experiences and projects that I got from it. I think that's one of the best ways to like, as an entry level computer scientist slash NLP engineer, to like put yourself above all the people who just, took a few coding classes or like got a computer science degree and also want to do what you're doing. I think that can make you pretty competitive.
Yeah, I'll add on to that. Even though I'm not in the NLP specific space, I would say experience is going to trump education for you at this point. Now, not saying don't do a master's or PhD, but get some experience under your belt. Like Riley was saying, build up your portfolio before you make any big decisions on grad school. Grad school is a great thing. I'm going to say it's great, but it's not necessarily going to guarantee you progress in your career. So if you're doing it for financial benefit, I would hesitate before you jump in. So definitely get some experience, decide if it's worth it for you. Since you already have a double major and two very strong majors, that might help you get the experience, open doors, more so than just having a single bachelor's would. So my advice would be take it easy on grad school for now, get some experience, and then see where you're at in a couple years.
Yeah, that's very helpful, guys. Thank you.
Hey, how are you? So I'm Camila. I'm actually Colombian. I'm working right now in with two indigenous communities here in Colombia. So And then a friend of mine invited me to this, meeting. And I said, computational linguistics, what is that, right? Because I haven't heard that here in Colombia. I heard it in my undergraduate, but not very, like, this is what entails being a computational linguist. I don't even know where to study that here in Colombia. But yeah, I was just curious. So I just went ahead and entered. So I gotta say, I'm still a little bit confused, or not confused, but I would like to know, or I'm very curious to know what specific activities you do in your jobs, because that's not like I don't quite understand. Like, you manage a lot of programs, but what? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably every computational linguist does a different thing in their day to day. Like, it sounds like Raylene and Andrew do two very different things from what I do. Um, like a normal day for me is a lot of, like I said, it's just kind of like research activities. So, like reading papers about sort of the status of the field and what people who are researching this have found out. And then a lot of it is just debugging code, like writing something, it's not working, like trying to figure out what's wrong with it. And then the fun parts are when I get to like train a new language model. So I just worked on one where I trained a really small model to do book reports on Jane Austen novels. So I kind of processed a bunch of Jane Austen work, put it in a nice format for the computer, and taught it to like generate book reports based off of questions I asked it. So it'd be like, who did Elizabeth Bennet fall in love with? And the answer was Mr. Darcy. And then it told me about how they fell in love. And so that's kind of the fun part, is when you actually get to play with the stuff that you make. But it is a lot of just kind of like in the weeds coding for me, and then meetings and stuff. But that's kind of what my end of computational linguistics looks like every day.
Yeah, the day-to-day differs a lot. So when I was first hired, I set up a bunch of meetings with different linguists on different teams just to try and ask, what is it that you actually do? And everyone had a different answer. Everyone's doing something different. And like everyone was doing a little bit of Python, some programming or scripting, and I was the only one who was going to be doing C++ apparently. So that was interesting. But yeah, a lot of it is, working with code to try to do something interesting with language. So I'm kind of not on the research side of things, unlike Riley. Like, I'm on a product team. I'm on the Google Assistant. So we have, something that is actually deployed that we want to improve for the users. And so we have some, feature we want to build and add on. And so we need to, model how does the language work? How do we get it to, work with our system and our existing components? And, it's it's kind of complicated to think about, but, trying to abstract from, okay, what is a real life sort of linguistic phenomenon that we want to capture? And how do we translate that into something that the assistant now does when you talk to it? Right. So day to day, there's sometimes programming, sometimes data analysis, sometimes working with vendors who like do annotations for us, sometimes working with conversational designers, working with computer scientists, things like that, just to try to get all these moving pieces kind of moving in the same direction, to help us. So day to day, it really does vary a lot, but all ideally with the goal of doing something interesting with language,
Yeah, and I'm in a very different position from those two. So I am very client facing. I meet the clients when they come to us to ask to build an AI solution. I take a look at their AI solution, what they want, and I tell them no if it's not going to meet their needs. So I say no a lot, which is kind of great to tell these big companies they shouldn't be doing it this way. And then I will often work with our team to propose alternate solutions that will work for their needs. So it's a lot of business requirements. And then once we sign with a brand or a client, I sometimes take the role of a conversation designer. So I meet with them, I design conversation flows. What's the customer journey? How is the bot going to interact with the customer for different situations? We do a lot of personas, tone of voice, a lot of fun stuff, a lot of user research. So we look at who the customers are, who's going to be using the bot, what's their ideal journey, what do they need. So a lot of research, a lot of working with clients, conversation designers. I work with the developers, the solution architect. And so I'm really working on communication between all these different teams, making sure that everybody understands the requirements and we're delivering a solution that will meet the client's needs. So it's a little bit beyond a role of, say, a project manager who's just managing the delivery. I'm managing the client's success. And so a lot of that too is, what do they need? And after we execute it, did we reach our goal? How can we improve it to continue iterating on that goal? So less technical, but a lot of communication, a lot of working with teams, but understanding the technical side so that I can communicate that clearly between whoever needs to hear it.
That's great. Thank you, guys.
If you guys could go back and change something that you did, like if you could do anything again to better prepare you for your careers, what would it be and how would you go about that?
I would have double majored in CS, probably. Like I was fully formal linguistics at the time. Like at the time, Utah didn't have any computational linguistics courses. So I was all theoretical syntax, which I still love. Like I'm still a syntactician at heart. But, you know, like I said, having the math background from when I was pretending to be an engineer really helped later on. But if I had more formal training in computer science, you know, like I've taught myself Python more or less and C++ from just coursework and needing to do it on the job. But, you know, I kind of am missing some of the fundamental background that you can get from actually taking classes in computer science. So I think that would probably be one thing I would do to, you know, I would change if I could go back.
I don't think there's anything I would change because I started out with TESOL for my bachelor's, then I jumped into theoretical linguistics, and then here I am in the computational linguistics space, right? And that was not where I saw my career going 5-10 years ago. But, you know, I jumped on the chatbot trend right before it became a trend, right? Before all this chat GPT and all the hype came out. But really, the thing that got me into my position, it was that I had done work on chatbots during my computational linguistics class with Aniello. When very first class he taught. And it was just basic chatbots with Python, very, very basic. And so when I interviewed for the job, they were looking for fresh grads who were willing to learn. And so by me just saying I have a little bit of Python, I built some really basic bots. That was enough for them to say, hey, you know, you're passionate, we'll hire you and we'll give it a try. But I think my only, not regret, but I would have spent more time building a portfolio had I known that that would have been the space I would have jumped into. I would have done a little bit more chatbot, a little bit more flows, just to build up that portfolio, not as I'm going, I'm building my portfolio. So that would be not a regret, but that's what I would do a little bit differently.
I feel similarly. Like it's hard to say that I would do something different because all the stuff that I did got me to where I am. So it's, I mean, maybe I could have done math instead of physics and I would have had a little bit more specific math background, I guess. But I think because my biggest piece of advice, and this is something that I'm still doing, but like explore as much as you can, as early as you can. I think, you know, we well, at least I do. I guess I can't speak for everyone, but I tend to get really like narrow-minded, like, okay, like I have this goal. This is the prescriptive thing to do to get to that goal. And then like I get the goal, and I'm like, oh, but like this other thing looks cool too. So like maybe I could have like tried that out first before I got to this goal. So I think that like, if you're interested in coding and you feel like maybe you don't have any classes like that right now, or you don't feel like you can take any more coding classes, like take a free course on Codecademy because those are great, or just try and build something. There's a lot of open source stuff to try things out with. Or like read a cool linguistics book that you didn't think that you would gravitate towards, like a mathematical linguistics book. Just explore, put your hands in every pie that you can get a hold of, because it's going to make you like a really well-rounded, interesting person to hire, because they're going to be like, oh, wow, you did all these really cool things and you have like an extremely unique perspective. And I think that is not only going to like help inform you decide what you want to do, but also just make you a really interesting, valuable person to be on any team.
So I have a question. I'm not gonna show my video because I have my kids, but do any of you, with all this awesome education background that you have and experiences, have you ever in your point of career felt inadequate or maybe inexperienced, or like you were not quite there where everybody else might have been? There's a word for that, I can't remember what, but have you felt that?
Yes, I think I'm not going to speak for everyone, but yes, you look at a lot of your coworkers and you think, oh, they've done so much. How on earth can I be in the same space as them? But I think that's the beauty of working in tech, is that it's always changing, it's always adapting, it's always growing. So there are so many learning opportunities that you can work together with a lot of incredibly intelligent people and still learn from them, but also provide your own insights as well. There's a lot of free resources online for certificates that you can do to constantly upskill yourself. But I'm in rooms with VPs and directors and presidents, and I often feel like I don't know if I should be here, but I bring a perspective to the room that I know is valuable based on my experience. And so it's just remembering that and learning from my coworkers and building up my experience as well. So that's normal for me. I don't know about the rest of you guys.
Yeah, definitely. It's the imposter syndrome as well. Like feel like, oh, like I'm the only one who doesn't know what's going on. It's common. It's something that's going to happen. You will definitely experience it. It's unfortunate, but you just kind of have to accept it and know that, yeah, like everyone else is also feeling it or has felt it at some point in the past. And, people do have very different backgrounds and levels of experience, and that's okay. And, that's what's going to happen, because people are going to be in a role like, you're going to be a new hire or like a candidate, and there's going to be people who've been at that job for 15 years who know everything about everything at the company in that role. It's like, you're not going to know as much as them, but that's okay, because you have different purposes and you have different roles and responsibilities, and being open to new things and trying to learn, constantly learn, like Riley was saying, is always a good strategy.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that's like a very human experience, feeling like, oh man, I'm behind, I don't belong here, or like I like somehow missed all the other things that everyone else learned, and now I'm just like trying to play catch up. But I mean, I think everyone's kind of in a perpetual state of like striving to like know more, be better at something. And there's always going to be someone who's better than you or knows more or has been doing it longer. But my grandpa has like some good advice sometimes. It's like, you're the only person that's ever done what you did, like with 100% success rate. Like to get to this point in your life, you have been 100% successful at everything that you've done so far. Even if like you got like an 80% on a test, it was like 100% success of getting that 80%. I don't know. It seemed a little bit more like wizardy when he said it, because he has a really long gray beard. But I feel like just putting value into your own experiences and your own failures and the things that you've learned, because no one else on earth has learned your like set of lessons. And I think that that's what makes everyone valuable. So it's easier said than done to think that way, but I try to.
I think that's a great perspective. That got me thinking too about my past roles and how every jump in my career from to senior or to something else was usually at the point where I got too comfortable. So as soon as you get comfortable, that's when you know you need to push yourself and learn something new, or switch teams, or ask for a new challenge, whatever it is. So I think being comfortable is a little bit dangerous. So I think it's a good time to change and add things to your experience once you start to get too comfortable.
Thought of another question. Do you guys know if your companies are hiring? And if they are, you know, how do people get connected? How do they make their resumes look good besides like what you guys have already said about experience and such?
Yeah, if you want to be a post-bac RA at PNL, there are a lot of opportunities for that. Or if you're not graduating yet and you want to do an internship, they also have either summer internships or like full academic year internships. And they have internships in like all sorts of fields, but definitely for AI and like NLP research, there are tons of opportunities for those, and at a lot of national labs. I know like Sandia hires around the same time that we do. So Sandia is also probably hiring NLP people. And I'm not sure about the labs on the East Coast, but I imagine they have very similar sort of like hiring timelines. So keep an eye out for national lab internships, because I know they pop up, and I know that they're always looking to sort of like hire on new NLP people and train them. Even if you don't know anything going into it, they like to sort of develop their people and then hire them in later. So if that is something you're interested in, I can give you more information. I actually have to go in like a couple minutes early, but I can leave my contact information. And if you're interested in any of those internship opportunities, I can definitely point you to those websites. So yeah, would be a good opportunity if you want it.
Thank you so much, Riley. I would love to be able to pass those on.
For sure.
Contact information. So thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Raylene and Andrew, if you have anything to add to that, and then there's a couple questions in the chat that I'll read out loud.
I would say currently my company is not hiring, but they often do. But I do know lots of other people and companies in this space. So if you're interested in a role that's maybe not quite as technical or traditionally prompt-loading, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. I know lots of conversation design roles that pop up, project management, what else? Sometimes even some development type roles, but a little bit less on that math and NLP sides, and a little bit more on just the developing and building.
I think in general, Google is usually always hiring. There was a hiring freeze back in like 2023 when everything was crashing down. But I think they're hiring again. Unfortunately, I don't think I've seen any specifically linguist roles recently. But there's usually going to be like data scientist or sometimes like conversational designer, right? That, or even just computer scientist that could be relevant based on your background. So even if you don't see a linguist, there could still be something that's relevant based on, you know, having a linguistics background. Yeah.
So from Sean here, says, which part of math is more related to linguistics, like algebra, combinatorics, which I have no idea what that is, counting and probability, or even geometry, and how about as computers as well? And then there's a part 2 and 3 in this, so we'll get to those.
That is a complicated question, I think. I think there's a lot of different, you know, subfields of math that are relevant to different parts of linguistics, right? So depending on what you're doing, if you're doing, you know, sociolinguistics or experimental linguistics, you know, statistics is really useful. If you're doing machine learning, matrix multiplication, linear algebra, calculus is really important. But then also, finite state kind of transducers, finite state automata, set theory kind of, it's all over the place is what I'm going to say. So it's hard to say what is the most important part. I guess it really depends on the specific area, but a lot of different areas of math are very useful for linguistics and in general, and computational linguistics in particular.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that. I've only used statistics in mine. I don't think I've taken a math class since calculus in high school. Maybe one in undergrad, but I don't use anything beyond statistics just for my type of work.
Personally, I am so grateful for the problem solving skills that I learned in my engineering and math classes. Like the equations that I learned don't relate to anything that I do now, but having the ability to work through a problem and just dive and dig and dig and dig until I figure it out has been one of the best skills that I learned in my early undergrad. So part 2 of Sean's question, is there anyone that's participated in NACLA, which is the North American Computational Linguistics Olympiad competition? And how would you prepare for it? And how has that helped in a college application? So is there anyone that has participated in NACLA?
I have not.
It's a
I'm
pretty
familiar with it,
small.
but not that familiar with it, unfortunately.
Last year we had one high school student, I think that was the one from Idaho. They traveled from Twin Falls, which is quite a long drive, to Salt Lake, and they actually made it to the international competition. But unfortunately they couldn't afford to go, and so they didn't get that opportunity, but they came back and they competed again this year, so they loved it so much. As for how it would help a college application, I mean, I know that the U just barely stopped making the ACT and the SAT so high on the list of things that they look for in an applicant. They're mostly looking for just experience. So just volunteering, sports, and just anything that you can learn, and like we've already been saying, building that portfolio. And then question 3 from Sean here is, what is the pay range for undergraduates? So I think Riley left, and Riley would probably have the best information for that. But Andrew and Raylene, if you feel comfortable talking about your pay range, I think that would also be helpful.
I guess for me, I didn't get a job after undergrad. I went straight to the master's program. But I did after that. After the master's program at Utah, I did work as a contractor at Google before coming back to school for my PhD. And there, I guess I don't know what the salary is. This was back in 2015, 2016. It was like $25 an hour, that kind of contracting work, which is basically as much as you can make in a fast food restaurant now in California. So I don't know if that's good. But that's what that was at the time. And then, yeah, I went back to school in Arizona, and then basically was there until I started my job here.
Yeah, I'm the same. I taught university English after my undergrad, but I can say that without my master's in linguistics, I would not have gotten the type of jobs I got. And I know I was working with many people that were fresh out of undergrad programs, and I'm sure they were paid about the same as me. I don't think I got too much of a boost. So my very first job in this space, I was paid 65,000 Canadian, and that's 48, under 50 US. So it felt good at the time that I was making real money, but it wasn't very significant.
Made it through an hour, so if anyone has any other questions, we don't have to go to the full hour and a half. So give it a second if there's any other questions. My favorite part of Zoom, sitting in the awkward silence. All right, well, there's not much else I can think of. Raylene, Andrew, do you guys have anything else that you would like to add about your experiences? Any advice that we haven't covered yet?
I would just say get hands-on experience. Riley mentioned it too, but build up your portfolio. There's lots of free resources. If you're interested in chatbots or voice bots, build free ones. There's lots of free applications that you can use online. There's lots of free courses. I know there's a resource called Superlingual, and he or she does interviews with various job positions from people with linguistic backgrounds. So that's helpful if you're interested in different spaces. But yeah, just get lots of hands-on experience, build your portfolio. You don't need a class for that. You can do it on your own. But if you're interested or you have other follow-up questions, like I said, you can always add me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to assist where I can or give advice if you need.
Yeah, I think sort of building on that, build your portfolio. It's sort of like either portfolio, but also kind of build out your resume or CV. So, you know, it might be hard to go straight from school to, you know, big tech job or any kind of full-time job. But like I was saying, I was a contractor at Google, and then I went back to school, and then I did an internship one summer for a company in Arizona called Nextiva, building chatbots. And then I also did an internship at Google in 2020, and then like sort of building up these other experiences, which, you know, gives you projects to talk about in your interviews. You know, you have more experiences, can definitely help. So, you know, they give you new skills, new experiences that can help you, you know, even if you don't use them directly later on, you know, they're useful to have.
I don't have anything specifically in computational linguistics, but I will say, since I was legally allowed to work, I pretty much changed jobs every 2 years or so. And it has been the best thing that I have ever done because I've gained a lot of relationships and a lot of references. And I have been able to find like better boundaries of like, okay, I didn't like this at this job, so that's why I'm going to look for a job that doesn't have that or does this better in the work culture and things like that. And it's just not really a thing anymore to like stay at one company for years and years and years. In a lot of places that I'm seeing, I think tech is probably different because it's somewhat more stable and you have a lot of opportunity for growth and trying new things and learning more, that you don't have to leave your job to do that. So
I actually think I've heard the opposite. I hear that lots of people jump all around. You know, people work at Facebook and then Google and then Microsoft and then, you know, keep circling back around. So, you know, people do that too as well. And it gives you, you know, more experience and, you know, learn new things, meet new people, get new connections. That's always useful.
Increase your salary.
My favorite thing in the last year. Networking's great.
Yeah, I agree. I've switched jobs a couple of times within the past 3 years. Not always by choice. Of course, layoffs were part of it. But it's opened a lot of doors too. I've advanced very quickly in my career just because I've learned a lot at the new jobs that I've applied for. And there's lots of kidnapping that happens in tech. Recruiters are always reaching out to you during busy times, less so during the layoffs. But lots of good opportunities once you get your foot in the door and you make connections and network with people as well.
Can I ask more about layoffs? This is something that I haven't heard much about. Is this something that's like just tech industry wide? And like, obviously with the pandemic, like that makes sense of why that could have a huge part. But do you guys have any insight on why those happen or if it is a frequent thing?
I think for tech, in my knowledge, I mean, I've only been working for 2 years, but one of the things that I understand is that there was a lot of overhiring during the pandemic. So like Google like almost doubled in size since like 2019, like the number of employees. And I guess they decided that they overdid it too much and they didn't need that many people. So um, it's, I guess ideally it's not something that's regular, but I guess who knows moving forward. You know, January 2023 was like the first big one for Google. So that was not great. And there was like a trickle throughout. And then again in 2024, this year in January, another pretty big one. So who knows? It could be a regular thing now, but hopefully not. Hopefully they figured it out, but no one knows. Don't want to be too pessimistic, but
yeah, don't be too pessimistic there. Our jobs are at stake. But I would say in my experience, 2023 was the big one that I know of. I was still in grad school during COVID. And the one that I'm familiar with, at least for Canada tech industry, is it was less so over hiring, but more the clients that we work with were tightening their financial belts. So big companies were not spending as much. They were limiting vendors. And so that often affected companies that worked with them. And so we were reduced. Conversation designers were one of the departments that were significantly impacted, which is unfortunate, but you need developers to build the tools. Designers just make them usable, which companies don't really care about usability as much sometimes. But yeah, I think it comes in waves, especially in a startup type industry. I mean, I guess Google's seeing it too, but there's waves, and I think you need to be prepared for it. I wouldn't ever say it's going to be fully stable, hopefully, but I would just be prepared for it. Always grow your resume, continue working on your portfolio, just network, have yourself ready that in the event something happens, you're ready for it. Not to make it sound like an apocalyptic event, but it's just good to be prepared.
Part of the job market, I think.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel that has ChatGPT and the rise of more chat bots affected your careers yet, or do you see that affecting y'all at all?
definitely, yeah. I mean, like, there's a lot of push for large language models, you know, LLMs in everything, doing everything. So, you know, like Google has is it called Gemini now, its own, you know, sort of LLM assistant thing, and trying to put LLMs everywhere. And so, I mean, yeah, like there's, you know, basically there's like reorgs, like, you know, people, we want to like change priorities to now do some more work on LLMs or whatnot. So it has, you know, and like there are still places for more traditional, maybe rules-based systems, but a lot of, you know, especially the executive level are all in on like AI, large language models. So that does trickle down into like day-to-day work and priorities and such things.
Yeah, that's what we've seen with clients too. A lot of clients come in, they want all this fancy generative AI stuff, and they're not quite ready for it, or they don't need it for their use cases. NLU-based models are still sufficient, and even better to some degree for the parameters that are set. So there's lots of hype and interest around it, and I think that'll continue growing. So I think a new area in linguistics that we'll see a lot more of is ethics and conversation ethics, and I think that'll be an interesting area. And I already see lots of linguists talking about it and getting more involved with the ethics surrounding LLMs.
Very cool. All right. Well, I feel like that's probably a good place to stop. Thank you, both of our speakers, for being here and having such great input. And I'm so happy that we had such a diverse panel. That was great, and you guys gave great answers. Thank you to all of our students and linguist enthusiasts for being here. And yeah, hope everyone has a wonderful day. And we'll see you out there on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, have a great
Thank
day.
you.